State of Play this week, and we say hello to Steve Tanzer once again from DelawareLiberal.net. Steve, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
In the next segment in our show, we're going to have Stephanie Hanson, former State of Player here on our show, but she's also the Democratic candidate in the upcoming special election for the state Senate. So when was the last time that the state Senate or control of it was up for grabs?
About 44 years ago.
So it's been in under Democratic control for that long?
It has. I believe, in fact, that it flipped when a Republican moved their desk over to the other side of the aisle. So it's been that long, yes.
So is the state GOP just going all in, doubling down behind Marino to sort of gain control?
Well, of course. I mean, what you had coming out of the presidential election was a demoralized Democratic Party. You had an energized Republican Party here. You had a vacant seat because, of course, the incumbent in the 10th senatorial district was elected as our lieutenant governor. Once she was sworn into office, that seat became vacant.
Right.
So that was the lay of the land at that point. And I think things may have changed a little bit. Here's the way I see it, if it's okay. Currently, the district itself runs from the southern part of Newark straight south along our western border through Glasgow, crossing the C&D Canal, then meanders southeast towards Odessa and picks up a significant portion of Middletown. District does have a Democratic edge. It's 45.3% D registration, 28.3 R, with the rest being independents or with another political party. If you just look at the Clinton-Trump vote in that district, if you take out all the other candidates, Clinton won the district by about a 57 to 43 margin. So that's essentially what you're looking at. However, a special election is always a turnout election. And looking back a couple of months ago, I think on this show I said the Republicans were well positioned to take this seat because you did have a demoralized Democratic Party, a resurgent Republican Party. On one hand, a chance to pick up something, and on the other hand, forced to defend something, which in fact they're only forced to defend because the incumbent senator moved to a different position. Those were the dynamics of the race then.
If the turnout is large, as expected in a special election, so then would you think that the Democrats would energize and say, well, okay, we lost the presidential election, so let's really go out and make sure we keep control of the state Senate?
Well, keep in mind now that in general, turnouts for special elections are exceedingly small. Minuscule in many cases. I've worked on enough of them, on both sides of them. It's like, so it's really not going to be very large. So that's why I say it's a turnout election. Who can turn out most of their voters? The Democrats have a registration edge. Here's how I think the dynamics of the race have changed since I first said the Republicans were exceedingly well positioned to take this seat back in like December. I think it was the first time I mentioned it. And that is, to what extent does, for lack of a better word, Trump revulsion mobilize voters in that district? Yes, it's a state race. But in many ways, both of the candidates are proxies for their parties. In addition, because of some of the things that Trump is doing, I think that they become proxies for whether or not you think what's going on is good or bad for the country. And I think in that context, it does give Democrats the advantage. Both parties have great field teams out there, volunteers. One thing that did do for the Democrats, it mobilized grassroots volunteers to come down and work in that campaign.
So we invited both candidates. We invited John Marino to come. Stephanie Hanson, as I mentioned earlier, will be here later. But Marino said he only wants to campaign in his district, so he declined to come onto the show. But he did almost win the race outright a few years ago.
That is correct, back in 2014.
And he was running against Bethany Hall Long.
He was running against Bethany Hall Long. There was a very key extenuating circumstance. I think Bethany Hall Long was cruising to a very comfortable re-election when her husband was caught on tape stealing signs of her opponent. And that, of course, generated a backlash. She still won, though, but I mean, it was much closer than people had ever thought it was going to be.
So what's your prediction then for the special election?
I think that if this election had been held 2 or 3 weeks ago, Marino would have won. I think, not knowing anything, but I think that because of the mobilization and people really just looking at Trump with alarm, the Democrats will be able to do enough, and that Stephanie Hanson will win the race. Narrow margin. I mean, it could go either way, but I think that's what's going to happen.
So when no matter how the election turns out, the count will always be 11-1 in the Senate, or 11-10 in the Senate.
Oh, okay.
So will we see something, not the Delaware way is, everyone goes along with the Democratic Party typically. But do you think we're going to start to see, alliances form on regional or an ideological basis?
Well, you've really had alliances all along. I think the Republicans, however, are beginning to come together on an ideological basis. One recent example of that was the fact that the Senate Republicans voted en masse to oppose the nomination of Sean Garvin to be Delaware's DENREC secretary. Now, Garvin is an administrator. That's what he is. He's not what anyone would call like a flaming environmentalist.
Okay.
And Greg Lavelle said, well, 10 senators had 10 different reasons for, I'm like, yeah, right. No, that was clearly something they decided to do en masse. I think it was actually a mistake.
So Dave Lawson's leaving for a family emergency, which prevented them from being able to vote. Was that a coincidence, you think, or just...
No. You mean on that vote, you mean?
Yes.
No, that wasn't a coincidence. He would have stayed with the Republicans on that. No, that was not a coincidence. That was a coincidence.
Okay.
Yeah, in other words, keep in mind, you need 11 yes votes. It doesn't matter how many no votes you get. If you don't get 11, you don't pass anything. So, I mean, so that's the way. Yeah, exactly. So there was no issue there.
Okay. Steve Tanzer, always interesting. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see what happens on February 25th.